Look, she's obviously gonna tell you. So just act surprised, okay?
Well, this is profoundly awkward. Hello, Internet, I'm Ren, and today I want to talk about The Last of Us Season 2 finale, Convergence. This episode had a lot going for it as an individual episode. It has some strikingly high highs and not necessarily low lows. And it does advance Ellie's story and the overall arc in a satisfying way. Unfortunately, as a season finale, I do find it a bit unsatisfying, and I think it leaves something to be desired. And as someone who has consistently defended this season overall, I do think it's sort of a manifestation of a bit of a pacing problem that this season has had since the first episode. But I can't say much more without spoilers, so let's get into it. This is going to be another low-key, unscripted review, so it's just me, my notes, and my hyperfixation while we break down this episode. And of course, this video will have spoilers for The Last of Us television series up to the season 2 finale. The episode starts with Jesse treating Dina's crossbow wound. Ellie is still MIA after doing what she did to Nora. Dina is terrified.
Jesse, don't let me. Can't let me die.
And having a rough time. But when Jesse offers her whiskey for the pain, she declines.
Have some, okay?
No.
It's gonna help. Have some!
I said no.
For obvious reasons. When Ellie finally gets back, after she convinces Jesse to let her in,
What's the name of your horse?
Shimmer, I'm alone. Open the fucking door.
she immediately goes to check on Dina. Dina's okay, and so is the baby.
Is the baby? It's okay. How do you know? You just do?
In a scene taken directly from the game, she cleans the scrapes on Ellie's back. And it's really tender and sweet. And Ellie confesses what she did to Nora.
I made her talk. It was easy. I just kept hurting her.
And while she was successful in making her talk, and learned that wherever Abby is, it's got something to do with
Whale and then wheel.
she's clearly feeling guilty about it. At first, Dina says,
Yeah, well, maybe she got what she deserved.
but Ellie doesn't seem so sure.
Maybe she didn't.
And she tells Dina why Abby came after Joel.
There was a Firefly base in Salt Lake City. They were gonna use me to make a cure, but it meant that I would have died.
And everything Joel did to save her.
Joel found out, and he killed everyone in the hospital. He killed Abby's father.
Dina seems pretty shocked and horrified by this revelation.
We need to go home.
So this was all talk then.
Would it make a difference if my family had hurt his people first? No, I would have hunted him down forever.
It is still the right choice, though. We cut to day 3, and Ellie and Jesse are getting ready to go look for Tommy. Dina is staying behind at the theater due to her injury, and Jesse really sweetly offers to let Ellie stay behind too.
I can do this alone if you want Ellie to stay.
But Dina doesn't hold her back, and instead gives her her bracelet for luck,
Not sure it's been working for you. I'm alive.
in another scene taken from the game. As they traverse Seattle in search of Tommy, Jesse hints that he knows about Dina's pregnancy,
Ellie, I see the way you two look at each other. I bet she even tells you things she wouldn't tell me, like how she's pregnant.
and Ellie confirms it.
Fuck. Oh shit, you were guessing?
And while Jesse's clearly frustrated with Ellie,
I'm gonna be a father, which means I can't die. But because of you, we're stuck in a war zone.
he mostly seems to just want to get out of Seattle alive so he can go home and co-parent his child with Dina,
So how about we skip the apologies and just go find Tommy so I can get us and my kid the fuck out of Seattle?
even though they're not together. We also catch a glimpse of a Seraphite mural featuring a different prophet,
There's more than one of her?
which leads to some interesting questions about how their religion works. And then we see a young Seraphite being hunted down by the wolves. Ellie tries to intervene, but Jesse stops her because it's 2-on-6, and because...
This is not our war.
And he has no plans of dying the hero of any wolves or Seraphites.
I am not dying out here. Not for any of them.
We then cut to a WLF base in an old Costco. Isaac is planning some kind of massive assault on the Seraphites, one he doesn't plan to survive.
By the time the sun comes up tomorrow, there's a very good chance you'll be dead. There's an even better chance I'll be dead.
And he's upset because Abby is MIA.
Any word on Abby?
Not since yesterday.
Park wonders why he's upset about this,
She's a good soldier, great even. But we have an entire fucking army out there. You in love with her or something?
but it seems like Isaac has been grooming Abby for leadership with the intention of her taking over his legacy with the WLF.
Who leads them? Who secures our future? It was supposed to be her.
If this was even slightly developed, it could have been a really interesting contrast to Jesse this season. Meanwhile, Ellie and Jesse arrive at the rendezvous where Jesse was supposed to find Tommy, but Tommy's still not there. It's an old bookstore, so Ellie snags a children's book for their kiddo.
You picked a good one. Should've thought of that.
And she and Jesse have a more in-depth conversation about the Jesse, Dina, Ellie love triangle.
Listen, about me and her, I don't really know what to say.
And it turns out there isn't one. Because although Jesse does love Dina, he's not in love with Dina.
Yes, I love her. Not the way you do.
In fact, it turns out he was in love with a girl who briefly passed through Jackson,
She was selling paintings, like landscapes and shit.
Were they good?
No, I bought 4 of them.
stayed a couple of weeks, but was on her way to Mexico.
Best 2 weeks of my life. She couldn't stay.
She even invited him to come along,
I wanted to, more than anything.
but he stayed behind for the community rather than pursue the relationship.
Then why didn't you?
Because I was taught to put other people first.
And while Ellie makes fun of him for that decision,
Okay. So, you're St. Jesse of Wyoming.
he points out that because he made that decision, he was there to save Ellie and Dina in Seattle.
Let me ask you this, Ellie. I go with that girl to Mexico. Who saves your ass in Seattle?
Although by the end of this episode, he'll wish he had gone to Mexico. But they're interrupted by some activity on the WLF walkie. It turns out some of them are pinned down by a sniper in South Lake, and they both immediately know that it's probably Tommy.
It's gotta be Tommy.
They get close enough to hear shots.
You hear that? It's in the right direction.
When Ellie spots the aquarium, which has a whale on it and is next to the giant downtown Ferris wheel, and she realizes that that's probably where Abby is.
Abby, the one who killed Joe, she's in the aquarium.
And she decides to abandon the Tommy rescue quest,
Too far to swim, with a
What
boat.
are you talking about? Tommy's over there. That's where we're going.
which justifiably pisses Jesse off.
You don't know that's him.
Yes, we do.
We don't. And even if it is, he's got them pinned down.
And while I can to an extent see her perspective, she frames this like a choice Tommy would approve of.
I know him. He would want me to do this.
But we already know that Tommy was generally not a big fan of prioritizing the revenge quest over the living.
If it had been you, Joel would be halfway to Seattle before the sun came up.
He'd be halfway to Seattle to save my life. But when we lost people, no.
He wasn't explicitly opposed to the revenge quest, but he had priorities. And I think if he were given the choice between rescuing Ellie and going after his quarry, he would pick rescuing Ellie every single time. So that was kind of a shocking moment for her and underscores the problem with her priorities and her sense of morality. But the episode doesn't really spend a lot of time ruminating on it. Beyond Ellie calling Jesse out as a hypocrite,
You think you're good and I'm bad? You let a kid die today, Jesse. His wife wasn't in your community?
especially when Jesse admits that he voted against the trip.
Jesus Christ, if 3 more people had voted with you, you'd be coming with me.
I voted no.
Why?
And Jesse rightfully calls her out for her selfish behavior.
Because everything you do for you. It wasn't in the best interest of the community.
Fuck the community!
So they split up.
I really hope you make it.
Jesse goes on his way to save Tommy, and Ellie goes ahead and gets herself into some trouble going after Abby. There's also a nice parallel here with Ellie and Jesse getting trapped together in inclement weather,
Here we are again. You and me in bad fucking weather.
and it unfortunately unfolds quite similarly to how their last experience in inclement weather did, which is with horror and death. Ellie takes a boat out in the storm, which, of course, improbably works. She gets caught by a giant wave and tossed asunder, and the boat sinks. And then she manages to swim to shore, fully clothed, with shoes on, with a backpack, in the freezing sound. Because when Ellie left, the cherry blossoms were still in bloom, which means it was probably mid-March or mid-April when they left, which means at the latest they're in late May in Seattle. And that's not generally warm enough weather for a fully clothed dunk in the Sound during a thunderstorm. Like, if the sheer weight of her clothes and backpack and everything didn't get her, the hypothermia would have. But against all odds, she makes it to shore, where she's immediately found by a group of Seraphites.
I'm not a wolf! Tell them!
Who commence with trying to hang her, and are only distracted when Isaac executes his assault on their village.
The village. The village! Leave her!
And Ellie steals another boat and flees as we see some explosions in the background. She makes it to the aquarium where she doesn't find Abby, but she does find Mel and Owen, and overhears them discussing whether to find Abby,
And I'm choosing no, also because it's Abby.
who seems to be caught out there somewhere in the war zone.
I can make it there and back in 30. If you're still here, you can get on board and keep going with us. If you're not, you're not.
Ellie holds them at gunpoint and tries to make them talk.
Where's Abby?
You gotta be kidding me.
But Owen makes the fatal mistake of reaching for a gun, and Ellie shoots him, Unfortunately, the shot goes through him and manages to nick a heavily pregnant Mel right in the neck.
Oh, God.
And she goes down, and in an absolutely harrowing scene, begs Ellie to perform an emergency C-section to save her baby.
We're gonna take it out. You're gonna take it out. Work fast. Work fast.
But Ellie can't figure out the instructions before she dies.
No transfers. What? Tell me what you're doing good. You're doing good.
And so the baby doesn't make it either. And it's so sad. Ellie's immediately traumatized and basically sits there in shock until Tommy and Jesse find her. They return to the theater, and Tommy tries to comfort her.
Hey, they were part of it too. They made their choices. That's all there is to it.
But she's having a rough time with it. And Tommy asks whether Ellie can make peace with Abby living.
But Abby gets to live.
Yeah. Are you able to make your peace with that?
And to an extent, it seems like she can.
So I have to.
For now, he and Jesse start planning a route out of town. Ellie and Jesse end up having another good talk,
Thank you for coming back.
Maybe I didn't want to. Maybe Tommy made me.
where they kind of resolve their differences.
Did he?
Nope.
Because you're a good person.
And Jesse says,
Also, the thought did occur. If I were out there lost and in trouble, you would set the world on fire to save me.
You sure about that?
and I'm not so sure about that, honestly, based on the way she just fully abandoned Tommy in this episode. Like, maybe she would set the world on fire to find Jesse, but not if it gets in the way of her revenging. And then Abby shows up. Jesse and Ellie hear someone breaking in, and so they run to help, and Jesse immediately gets shot right in the face. And that's it for him. He's not making it out of Seattle alive after all. And I'm sad. Abby has Tommy and Ellie at gunpoint. She thinks Tommy killed Mel and Owen,
He killed my friend.
No, I did.
and she's absolutely seething when Ellie admits that it was her.
I was looking for you. I didn't mean to hurt them.
She accuses Ellie of wasting the gift they gave her and letting her live. And then it cuts to black, and we hear a shot fire.
I let you live, and you wasted it.
And then we fade into Abby on Seattle, day one. And that's it for the season. Overall, this was a good episode. I did enjoy it. I don't feel like my time was wasted. I think that the deaths were impactful, and I think the balance between emotional storytelling and these tensely dramatic scenes was well done. And I think it did do a good job of advancing the plot and sort of driving home the cost of Ellie's revenge. That being said, I do think it's unsatisfying as a season finale, especially because we know that it's going to take probably another 2 years before we are allowed down from this cliff that we're hanging on and finally get to see where this story goes. I think the season also felt really rushed. 7 episodes just isn't enough. I think a 10-episode season actually would have been perfect. And there's so much more that could have been expanded with a longer season that would have made the story better. So I'm going to talk a little more about my thoughts about this episode and how I think it illustrates some problems with the season overall and what they could have done differently. Basically, it feels like this episode, and by extension this season, was just set up for season 3, as opposed to telling a fully complete story in its own right. And I think especially when you compare that to the tight pacing and pretty perfect narrative arc of season 1, it does fall a bit flat. And where this episode in particular ended up kind of retroactively makes the rest of this season's pacing a little bit more weird, but it still had a lot of great moments, and I don't really think it had any bad episodes. It's just as a whole, it lacked a certain cohesiveness and completeness in terms of its narrative. So let's talk a bit about the deaths in this episode. Owen and Mel's demise plays out pretty similarly to the game, insofar as there is a self-defense component. Although in the game, Mel actually gets into like a knife fight with Ellie, and here she's more of just an innocent bystander. And I think that does make her death a lot more tragic and poignant because she didn't attack Ellie, she didn't pull the gun, she was literally just standing there trying to cooperate. And her begging Ellie to save the baby absolutely breaks my heart. The acting in that scene is absolutely phenomenal, especially from the actress who plays Mel, whose name I forgot to look up, but I'll put it on the screen, and Bella plays off her really well. That said, although that scene was absolutely devastating, I think it would have hit a lot harder if we got to spend more time getting to know Mel. And I know we'll see more of her next season when we explore Abby's perspective, but I think retroactively making that death sadder isn't as powerful as it would have been if Mel was someone we actually knew and were attached to. Because ultimately she seemed like a decent person that I was kind of rooting for, but she's also still embroiled with the WLF and their, latent fascism. And so it's hard to be too sympathetic towards her. So I think we could have just used more development there. Regarding Jesse's death, I am so sad to see him go. I think he was really underutilized this season, honestly. He was a really nice foil to Ellie and to Abby. As someone who's so focused on community, generally rational thinking, opposed to revenge, and unselfish to a fault, arguably.
Because I was taught to put other people first.
The way Ellie highlighted some of his hypocrisy this episode was really interesting, and I wish we just had a little bit more time to explore that. But alas, poor Captain Wyoming. Basically, I just think Jesse needed more screen time, and also that his death scene felt a little bit too rushed. He dies so quickly, and we move on from it to the confrontation with Abby so immediately that it doesn't really have much weight, and we as the audience don't have a lot of time to process it before we shift to Abby's perspective entirely. And I think that's a mistake and robs us of what could have actually been a really, really strong ending in terms of showing us the extent of what Ellie's revenge costs and how it ripples out to so many other people who are completely undeserving and not even involved in her conflict. It all just felt very abrupt and like we never really got a chance to know Jesse that well before he was gone, and I think he deserved better. Regarding who fired that last shot, I think we're going to find out that it's Dina and that she non-fatally shot Abby, who will then escape. That's my best guess. While I'm not saying they won't do something wild like kill Tommy, I don't think they'll do so here. And they're obviously not going to kill Ellie. I doubt they'll kill Dina because they don't want to be yelled at for burying your gays. And that would be a really unsatisfying change. And of course, I don't think Abby's going to die here. So yeah, my best guess is that Dina fires a shot, hits Abby somewhere innocuous like the shoulder, and Abby makes a break for it. But I guess we'll see in 2 years, probably. And that's a nice segue for me to talk about how Dina has basically nothing to do in this episode besides limp around and give Ellie the friendship bracelet. And after having so much of her this season, it kind of felt weird how little she had to do here. But I guess I understand it since we wanted to spend a little bit more time with Ellie and Jesse, so I can tolerate it. They also didn't do much with Tommy this season, and I think that's kind of an unfortunate choice, because the way that they changed his character from the game, where he was a lot more into the revenge plotting, I think it would have been a good contrast to Ellie, since he's taking a much more rational approach to it, and also seems to have a better understanding of what Joel would actually want, which is not for Ellie to give up her whole life in the quest for revenge. I think it could have been a nice juxtaposition between the way Ellie is grieving and the way that Tommy is grieving, and we could have explored more of Tommy's sense of a loss of identity and losing his brother. You know, someone who's looked out for him and protected him his whole life. Because if you remember in season 1, the entire reason that Joel accepted the quest to bring Ellie to Salt Lake City was so that he could get a vehicle to go find out what happened to Tommy.
We'll get her to your crew, but before we hand her over, they give us everything that we want. Deal.
Joel has always been looking out for Tommy. And so to lose him, and to lose him like that, is a huge impact on Tommy's life and would massively change who he is as a person. But we didn't really get to explore that at all because we were so focused on Ellie. I also think it would have been nice to build up that relationship with Tommy and Ellie more. It also would have made it cut a lot deeper when Ellie decides to go after Abby instead of rescuing Tommy. So what else could this season have done better? I really think another couple of episodes would have helped a lot. I also think if they wanted to do part of the Seattle story this season, they should have stopped with Ellie torturing Nora, because that was a huge emotional turning point for Ellie, and also a satisfying conclusion to her arc this season, because we've basically been seeing Ellie lose her innocence and her sense of morality and descend into this obsession with revenge that blinds her to everything else. And that moment where she decides she's going to make Nora talk, where she shuts down any feelings of compassion or pity she might have for her, and then leaves her alive, is wild. And I think a great place to end would have been Ellie walking away with Nora still breathing, and then you cut to Abby, if that's how you want to play it. But instead, we're kind of at a middle ground where we've already hit that emotional turning point, but now Ellie feels incredibly guilty about it and is accepting that maybe it's a good idea to turn around and go home.
We need to go home.
And then Abby intervenes. And while that does have some elements of tragedy in terms of almost avoiding everything else that Ellie's going to do, I don't think it's a satisfying place to end the story, especially when it's going to take us so long to continue from this point. I also think it actually should have taken them longer to get to Seattle. It was kind of a mistake to cram that all into one episode, when we actually could have done something sort of similar to season 1, where each episode sort of features a different part of their road trip while still advancing to an overall goal. This would have still given us a chance for lots of Ellie and Dina moments. Maybe we could have met some people along the way. And it would have made it so that the Seattle storyline doesn't feel so spread out. Because while I'm a fan of a slow burn, the pacing of the Seattle storyline doesn't feel as tight. And I think that sort of ponderous, meandering storytelling style would work in a longer season, but in 7 episodes, we just spend too much time on it and not enough time on the buildup. We also would have been able to intersperse scenes of Tommy and Jesse going after Ellie and Dina, which would have let us get to know Jesse better and get to know Tommy better and establish his relationship with Jesse more, as well as his relationship with Ellie. And we also could have shown Abby in Seattle before Ellie arrives. I understand the writers wanting to save most of Abby's story for next season, and we could still start at Seattle Day 1 next season, but it would still be good to get more build-up for Abby and her friends, to see how she goes from revenge-obsessed, special fascist, to a genuinely likable character, because Abby's story is a redemption arc, and I think it would be good for us to see more of why she needs to be redeemed, because it's not just what she does to Joel. They don't even have to make us like her yet. I just want to see more of her and more of her relationships with the other WLF members, especially her Salt Lake City crew. We could even have contrasted Ellie's journey with flashbacks of Abby and her crew traveling to Seattle from Salt Lake. Like, there's so many ways that they could have been incorporated while still saving the big perspective switch for next season. We also should have spent more time developing the Seraphites and the WLF, maybe getting to know more of them. I would have even been fine with seeing a bit of Lev and Yara before they cross paths with Abby. Instead, it feels a little bit half-baked, and there's not really stakes for us in the conflict between the two of them. Like, it's sad, but it's hard to care a lot about what's happening because we don't know any of these characters. So, overall, I do think this season was a lot weaker than season 1. I think it had so much going for it in terms of really good emotional storytelling. I loved the relationship between Ellie and Dina. There were a lot of great zombie fights and a lot of really cool ways that they either diverged from the story or brought it to life really accurately. I laughed, I cried, I did have a good time. It's just, this was so close to being a great season, and I think unfortunately, with how underwhelming the finale feels, it's just a good season. But that's just my opinion. What did you think of this episode? Were you satisfied by the finale? What do you think they could have done differently? And are you excited for season 3? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe for more videos. See you next time. Wiedersehen.